Welcome everyone to this special webinar titled Leadership in Challenging Times. This is a topic that of course is always relevant, but especially relevant now in this challenging time with the global pandemic and hopefully the end of the global pandemic and the way out of it. And to say that our guest today has experience from leading people in challenging time is an understatement. Throughout his career, he has led people and companies across a wide range of industries, both national and internationally. He has held executive positions in firms including McKinsey & Company, McDonald's, Statoil Fuel and Retail, Alimentation Couche-Tard, Circle K, and now Norwegian. Back in 2017, he visited BI and gave our students insights into his own leadership philosophy, documented in his book, The Essence of Business, describing his own experience-based methods summed up in the return on capital employed concept. Last year, he took on a new challenge by accepting the position as CEO of Norwegian, one of the largest low-cost airlines in Europe. Jacob Schram, welcome back to BI. It's very nice to have you back here at BI again.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Jacob, everyone has been following your efforts on restructuring Norwegian. But who is Jacob Scrum?
That's a good question. I like to think about myself as a quite normal guy, and I think I am. I like most others after Friday just to relax, open a bottle of wine and enjoy life. I'm a family man. I have a daughter 25 and a son 20. Always follow them. I think the prioritization between family and business is extremely important. So I focused a lot of my time on the family as well. And I'm a social person. I like social settings. I think the people that knows me remember that, but also from business times. And I'm getting a lot of energy from nature, all the way from I was a scout when I was young until now. Last but not least, I would say I like challenges.
How would you define your leadership style?
Well, first of all, I think people that I've had the pleasure of working together with will say I'm a people leader, first and foremost. Simply because I think the biggest asset the company has is its people. The combination of competence, but also behavior. It's not good enough if you have super competence. You also have to have the right behavior. And trying to lead and foster that right behavior is super important. So I'm a people leader, and at the same time I'm a leader that likes to kind of point out the direction, but give people headroom to solve how to get there. I don't like to micromanage. I'm very much into details, but I don't micromanage. And I like people that has the attitude that leadership is nothing you get with your position. It's not position decided. Leadership is something that you seek. You have to have a hunger for leadership, and I think then you're probably the best leader.
You have also kind of documented your leadership style in your book, The Essence of Business. Can you explain kind of the main takeout from that book?
Yeah, I think the first part of the book talks about moving from Statoil to Circle K, the kind of the storytelling behind the cameras. But my message in the book is really what I believe are the 5 most important elements of a business. I mean, first, you cannot hide from results is super important. Results, you just have to create results. If you don't create results, you will not be a leader for a long time. And what I mean with results is that you have to have a healthy balance sheet. Secondly, you have to ensure that you have enough cash flow. And I can assure you, I have felt the pain of not having enough cash flow with Norwegian. And thirdly, you have to produce results in forms of EBIT or net profit. So those 3 elements, I think, is the recipe of results. But if you, as leader, think about results 24/7, I think you become a very bad leader. So you have to concentrate on what creates results. And in my view, it's 3 things that do that. It's strategy, it's execution, and it's people. And you have to be good at all of them in a company. Strategy, pointing out the direction so everyone knows where to go and how to get there. And execution, simply making it happen. And people, that binds it together. And then the last element is really leadership. How to wrap this together. And leadership is a big word. And leadership is very different. It's very different to lead and to lead within strategy versus to lead within execution versus to do people leadership. You have to play on kind of all the strings you have. So I expect from my leaders that they can do all 3, and my executive team especially, but no one is perfect. So that's kind of the complete picture of the business, and what you strive for is really 2 things in my view. You strive for getting great customers, and you strive for getting the right employees. Not necessarily the best, but the right employees. Then you create a customer brand, and the ultimate of that is creating fans. And then you create a tribe, great employees and a great culture. So in essence, that's kind of what I'm writing about in my book.
I know that you are fond of metaphors, and you have already used a couple of them, fans and tribe. Why? Why is metaphors important? And you also have, I know that you have talked about a healthy company as almost like a peach. Can you explain what do you mean by using all these metaphors?
First of all, I think metaphors, I use that because I think one of the most important tasks for a leader is to make things simple. I hate leadership where they try to be very kind of complicated. A leader should be kind of like a transformation box. So when complicated messages comes from the board, from finance people, from other places, from the market, the leader should kind of transform that into simple language. So everyone can understand it, because when everyone understands the message, it's much more simple to run fast. So that's why I use metaphors. And metaphors is kind of a language in itself. When you can use a metaphor that most people has an experience to, it clicks in the brain. So that's why I use it. So for instance, the model that we talked about now, the 5 elements of results, strategy, execution, people, and leadership, for me, that's a peach, where the most boring part is the stone. When you eat the peach, you have the stone left, and that's results. I mean, basically, it's boring to just look at the numbers. You could imagine if you were sitting on a football game and people said to you, the only thing you are allowed to look at is the scoreboard. You're not allowed to look at the play. Only focus on the scoreboard. That would be the most boring football game ever. And if you only look at the numbers and don't see the play, that's boring. So results is the stone, strategy, execution, and people is the flesh, which is really the good thing. And leadership is the skin around. because if the skin is full of holes and brown spots, etc., you don't attract customers, you don't attract people.
Jacob, you led a substantial program of change with Statoil into Circle K. Can you talk about that and what was the kind of biggest challenges you experienced?
At first, I remember when we moved out of Statoil, that was a big day because it was like the little brother grew up and became independent. So Statoil Retail, moving out, being an independent company, being IPO'd, that was a super big day. Like you moving out from your home to your first apartment. And the first night you sit in that apartment, you start shivering because you don't have money, you don't have anything.
The parents anymore.
Don't have the parents. But it's exciting.
Yeah.
So we lived in that environment for 2-3 years. And we started to like it. We started to think about moving into a bigger flat and getting more kind of companies. And suddenly, 15 minutes before a board meeting, the chairman, which was Birger Magnus, took me to the side and said, you know, Statoil is actually now negotiating with a company in Canada called Alimentation Couche-Tard. Alimentation what? I never heard about them. And he said, probably they will agree because Statoil had 55% of the shares. And if they agree, they will give the offer to the rest of the shareholders. So we might be integrated into another company again. And that was so big a disappointment. Yeah. It was like your mom and dad popped up again and they married you without asking you. Yeah. So we thought, do we want to be part of this? And luckily, I have to say, because I was sitting with my phone and thinking to myself, should I dial the headhunters that I know? And I said to myself, no, you wait 1 year because now you're emotional. And that's the best decision I've taken. I stayed there for 6 more years. And what I learned with Circle K was enormous. But of course, basically, back to your question, this was a merger between 2 companies. This was the biggest acquisition they ever done. It was the only one in Europe. It was super important for them, and it was the start of building Europe. And we was at that point of time 40% of the bottom line for Couche-Tard, so pretty big. But 2 cultures, and of course we think American culture, Nordic culture, quite alike, but they are not. And I think the biggest difference and where the challenges was is that in Scandinavia you like to think long term, but of course also short term, but you always like to have a direction where to go and an aspiration. You didn't have that much in US. Yes, they listen to a long-term view, but the only thing that matters is results tomorrow.
The middle of the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't produce results tomorrow, you can talk yourself out of the business about talking about long term. So when you're working with Americans, you have to make sure that you actually deliver results tomorrow. Yeah. So that was one thing. Another thing was the culture of leadership. Because what we are used to in Scandinavia is that we have a pretty flat structure and we are used to getting challenged. As a leader, you want to be challenged and you involve people in decisions. That was not common in the American culture the same way, I think. It was more the boss has said, and then you turn around and you do exactly what the boss has said. So if you had the wrong boss, the boss could say, follow me over the cliff, and everyone would run over the cliff. I think that's the good thing with Scandinavian leadership. If the boss is so stupid that he runs over the cliff, most of the people will actually not jump with him. Yeah. That doesn't mean that they are not loyal, because it's a difference between being obedient and being loyal. You shouldn't be obedient just to be stupid. You should challenge, but at the same time you should be loyal when a decision is taken, and loyal to kind of the values and loyal to what you stand for.
After your time in Circle K, you spent time on personal investments in startups, and you also advisor for the global startup generator Antler. What can you say that you have learned from the experience in investments?
First of all, I always been curious, and I always admired people that started their own business. As a small child, I had a dream of starting my own business. It's something very respectful of a person that has an idea and make it through. So I always liked that. In Circle K, I used to collaborate a lot with these environments. So instead of building a big innovation department, which was more common in the 90s, 2000, I started to collaborate with, for instance, Startup Lab and entrepreneurs like, for instance, Trond Ribe Knudsen, that has probably one of the most famous investors in Norway, focusing on entrepreneurs. And with him, for instance, I defined the operating model with all the elements, and he knew that. And I came with him with my management team, and he had organized speed dates on the different topics. It could be marketing, it could be supply, it could be different things. And then he had a lot of startups which he presented to us. So I'm pretty used to working with them. So when I stopped in Circle K, I said to myself, now I want to devote some time to really work in that environment, more as an advisor maybe. And I contacted Trond, and he took me into several investments, and Tore Myrholt did the same, and suddenly I was into that environment and Startup Lab, etc. And I ended up investing in 10 companies myself, which I followed, and some more active advisor role and some more passive. And I think that gives me a lot of experience. But what I also learned was that the dream of going from having an idea to making it a business, if you really talk to all the startup people, it's extremely hard work. So what I see now, a lot of young people that want to be entrepreneurs and start companies, that's good. We need that in Norway. But they should be prepared that all the success stories you're reading in the paper, there is enormous amount of work behind it. There is enormous amount of disappointments before you actually succeed. So it's very important that people don't kind of paint that picture pink. It's difficult.
So how do you take this experience with you in your job as CEO of Norwegian?
One of them is cash flow.
Yeah.
I mean, cash flow is vital for a startup company. They almost live from week to week. They manage to get investors, have some cash. They need to protect that cash like a gold mine, because that brings you some months ahead. And then you need new cash again. That was more or less the same situation in Norwegian. When I started, the cash was so low that we almost lived from week to week. So cash is extremely important. And the second thing I bring with me, which I saw in retail, retailers are pretty good at when they develop products. They develop it not 100%. They develop a product maybe 60 to 80%, and they throw it into the market. See reactions, get it back, flick on it, throw it back to the market. The startups that has more difficulty of succeeding, they keep improving the product without testing it. And then they think now it's 100%, but then time has run from them. So throwing out an 80% product, 60% product, that's the way forward.
So jump into the water and start swimming.
Yeah, I think that's super important.
Yeah. You know, even before COVID, Norwegian was in a rather difficult position. So what made you think you were the right person to lead this company?
Well, to be quite honest, I didn't think that. I was approached by the company that was going to find the CEO. I was doing some other work with them, and then the person there asked me, "What about Norwegian? Could that be interesting for you?" Because I've said I'm ready for another challenge. I want to go back. I miss the pulse. I miss the leadership, and I miss big companies and challenges. So I decided to go back again. And then he said, "What about this?" And I said to him, "You must be crazy. I mean, first, I don't know anything about airlines. Secondly, they have big financial problems." And he said, "Well, listen to this. It's quite interesting." And I said, "Okay, let's take a meeting." And we started talking through it, and it became interesting. And I met the chairman, Nils Medegård, which is a fantastic person, and we clicked together. And gradually, I started to, when I'm starting to process, then I'm moving.
Yeah.
And what attracted me in Norwegian is it's a fantastic brand. It's a Norwegian industry adventure, like Askeladden, who is very famous in Norway.
Yeah.
I'm very focused on future mobility. And I've seen what's happened with cars through Circle K, going from normal combustion engines to electric cars. I think exactly the same will happen within the airline industry, but maybe after 2030. And I said to myself, I want to be part of that journey. I want to be part of, together with a team, to be on a journey, moving from where it is today, surviving, being healthy, and then moving into future mobility.
The main office, and you are based in Norway, while Norwegian is in a kind of international industry. Do you see any pros and cons of being kind of based in Norway?
I would say the pros with Norway is that it's a quite small community. So a lot of the business environment knows each other. So that's both good and bad, but mostly good, I would say. Norway is seen as a solid and respected country in business environment internationally. Scandinavian leadership style is very much appreciated. More and more people start to see that involvement that we talked about is actually very important. And I think we are very much respected, going from being a small nation to actually in the forefront of the oil industry and now in the tech industry. So it's a lot of advantages. The disadvantages sometimes could be that it's a small company. When you have to attract international resources, it's not obvious that they move to Oslo or other places in Norway. But I would say the advantages is much bigger than the disadvantages.
Norwegian was in kind of a tough situation before COVID, and also the aviation industry has been kind of affected by the pandemic for more than a year now. How do you see that the aviation industry has been mostly affected, and how do you see the future of the aviation industry?
Now, obviously, when it really hit in March last year, we were flying 156 airplanes, and within days we had to ground everything. So it was really like you see in the movie, a war room, where crazy people running around, and like you see a war movie, and you see the board in the middle, and where is all your positions.
Yeah.
Getting planes down on the ground. Then it was all about getting Norwegian people back to Norway. And then it was all about getting cost out of the system, especially for us that didn't have cash flow. Because not flying, no income, a lot of cost. So we desperately had to get cost out. So furloughing people become extremely important. And then we furloughed 80% within weeks. That's a huge process. And then we started to bankrupt companies. So that was a brutal, brutal process. And then when we came in April, you were kind of into hibernation. And we started to say, let's use this time to something productive, other than, of course, the financial restructuring, which started immediately. And that team has done a fantastic job. But let's also look at our strategy, because we will not be the same company as we were before. No. We need to change everything. And we started to work with that. And then we thought we had a strategy in place, presented it to the government. The government said no. And we had to go into plan B, which was really the restructuring process, because we knew we were running out of money before Christmas. And the only thing that could save us, we could hear the wolves behind us. We had to get a safe haven. And that was the examinership process in Ireland and then the restructuring process in Norway. We went into that, did what we did. And it's actually equally difficult to get out of a process like that. But we are about to do it now. And if you then compare this to what happened in the American airline industry some years back, there were way too many airlines. A lot of them suffered. A lot of them went into Chapter 11, which is the same as we've been through now, Examiner and Reconstruction. And the companies that survived coming through Chapter 11 became the winners, because they have cleaned up the balance sheet, got debt down, and was restructured and was a quite different company afterwards. They were the winners, whereas companies that has an okay economy didn't have to go through it. They became the losers. So I think Norwegian now coming out of this will be super strong because we managed to do that. And I think the aviation industry a year ago and now it's all about surviving. And the second phase is restructuring the company. And I think when things start to get normal again, you will see a lot of M&As, mergers, acquisitions, etc. Things have to happen in Europe, and I think that will happen also in the aviation industry here.
So how do you see industry in general after the pandemic? What have you learned?
I think the pandemic, in a way, has learned us a lot of things. First of all, the way to do business. I think we speeded up digitalization. I think we all feel that. Yeah. Normally, we would probably sit in front of the crowd now. Yeah. But now we're doing this digitally, and that's absolutely possible. People can sit at their kitchen table and watch us. We have Teams meetings all the time. And implementing such things in the normal world takes so long time because people don't want to adapt. Now we were forced to adapt. Yeah. So I think we probably frog leaped 10 years. I don't think business will go back to normal again. I think we will continue to use Teams. But now we're starting to see the other side of this coin, the pain of digitalization. Because we are people with flesh and blood. We are social human beings. We want to be together. We miss the office. Yeah. We miss the colleagues. So what we also found out is that digitalization and sitting in your own cube, that's not the future. So I think the combination is the future. I think what you will see is that office spaces will dramatically reduce. Maybe you construct offices for 1/3, half the people you have, because you would expect that half the days in the week, people will be in their, wherever they are, digital, and the other half, they will work together on projects and need to see each other and discuss, etc. And I think especially the strategy side, the network side, then you need to see each other and build network.
So it will be more purpose-driven, whether you use Teams or whether you kind of meet people in a meeting room or.
Exactly. Yeah. And one thing that is so stupid when you think back on how we worked is starting 5 in the morning, taking the first airplane to Copenhagen or Stockholm or Bergen, to have 3 meetings in the day and returning late in the afternoon. You can't even see your children because then they go to bed. What were we doing? I mean, it's stupid. Another thing that is stupid is when you see the line of cars, the queuing in the morning, people sitting 1.5 hours in the queue, because everyone has decided I need to be at the office at 8 o'clock. Instead of saying if you live in Asker or if you live outside, why don't you go at the office at 10 or 11 where there's no cars and the first 2-3 hours you have at Teams?
But how do you think this will affect your industry? Because going to Bergen for a meeting from Oslo for 2 hours will not happen anymore.
No, actually, what I just told you is pretty stupid from kind of the industry I'm coming from. I'm trying to talk down, don't fly anymore. But no, definitely business business trips will go down. I think McKinsey estimated around 30% less, might even be more. But I think leisure will not go down. No. Maybe quite the opposite. I think when travel restrictions are lifted now, it will be like putting calves out of on the grass. So leisure will explode, and that's the good thing about Norwegian, because our main segment is leisure, family trips, leisure, beach, city, etc.
Jacob, going back to your career and you as a person, with the kind of all the variety of the companies you have been CEO of or worked in, what are your kind of most important experience from your career, would you say?
I would say,
especially in terms of leading people in difficult situations.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is listen. Listen to people. Sitting down and listen to people. Keep calm. Don't panic. That's super important, because everyone will look at the captain of the ship, and if that person is stressing around, everyone gets stressed. So I think whether you have a small leadership position or a high leadership position, keep calm and listen to people.
We also have the possibility of having people looking at this webinar, asking questions. And I have one question here. You used the term competence and added the term behavior separately. Can you elaborate more the difference between them?
Yes. Competence for me is the skills. It's what you are supposed to do. If you are responsible for accounting in a company, that you do those accounting super good. If you are responsible for marketing, that you have a very good marketing plan. All of that is very good. You're making the right campaigns, etc. That for me is competence. Behavior is really how you interact with people in the company. It's the way, if you are a leader, it's how you do your leadership. I mean, you meet people that are extremely good at creating results, but sometimes they step over people. They don't kind of help other people succeeding. They're not collaborating. They're not part of the team. They're not living the values that the company has. When the company has values, it's the personality of the company. If you decide you want to have a completely different personality than the company, that's bad behavior. That's what I mean.
So it's the kind of difference between knowing how to do things and wanting to do things.
Yes.
Yeah. And in your book, you highlight the importance of motivation. How do you motivate people? Because that is related to the question we just talked about.
Yeah. First of all, I think listen. If you want to motivate people, you need to understand what drives them. And to find that out, you need to listen to them. And secondly, I try to describe the total picture. I think that every human being wants to be part of a journey. But if you're only sitting down in the machine room and only see the machine going up and down, you're less motivated. Thirdly, I think it's super important to motivate people that you look back and celebrate. If you go in the mountains, you know that if you're not only allowed to look forward and never kind of turn around and enjoy the view, it's terrible to go in the mountain. When you stop, you turn around, wow, what a view. It's exactly the same when you develop a company. Too often we only focus on next target, next target, next target. Turn around and celebrate what you achieved. And fourth, I think, praising. Praising people in front of others, correcting people alone. People want praise. And there maybe the Scandinavian culture is very kind of, is not as outspoken as the American culture. I think we can learn something there. And the last thing I would say to motivate people is constant improvement. You have to get people understand that what you achieve now is super good, celebrate it, but tomorrow it is the composed of another success.
Yeah.
In other words, you need constantly to find new ways to improve. And here I think we can learn a lot from the athletes. Even if you want the gold medal, you can look through your run and say, I wasn't perfect there, I could improve there, etc. If you get that mindset to people, they are self-motivated.
You talked about the war room metaphor, and what you just talked about concerning motivation. Can you give an example of how you have done this for the last year with Norwegian?
Yes. First of all, with Norwegian, it was just important to point out the direction, I think. The company was trying to find out where to go. Yeah. And that was one of the first things I focused on. And the first months, the really first months, what I did in January and February was just traveling around. Not coming with kind of solutions, etc. I just traveled around to all our bases, to Ireland, to Barcelona, to Gardermoen, to a lot of the places, and said hello to people, talk to people, listening to people. Because when you do all these interviews and talks to people, pilots in the cockpit, crew back in the galley, etc., suddenly you start to see a picture. So before I came with anything, I just traveled around. Then I tried to get a team around me, which was the right team and with the right behavior, and recruiting people internally, but also some external. And I have that team now, and that's also super important. Then the pandemic hit. I would say from that, everything has not been normal. It's been abnormal. But now, what we try to do now is again telling people where we are going. We are trying to re-energize the company, because when you have been furloughed for so long time, you need to find your energy again. So we do a lot of communication. I have every Friday what I call a Friday wrap-up, like this digitally, Jacob's Creek. I have, or we have galley chats, interviews with certain people, put on Workplace. We use Workplace very much. And I also introduced something during the pandemic with my team I called walk and talk, because you get so tired of sitting in Teams meetings. So I said, let's meet in your place and have a walk together for an hour or two and just talk. And then we talked business, but we also talked a lot about their life, experiences, fun things, etc. That was actually very good.
You know, BI, being an international business school, we have kind of very high focus on trying to shape the leaders of tomorrow with what we are doing. What do you think will be the most sought after attributes or competence or skills that will be needed for leaders looking forward?
I think in the society we are living in now, and in a way, things change, but it never changes. So I think in core of everything is competence. You have to be good at what you're doing. That was the same in the 1920s. It was just a different world. So having a handcraft, if you do finance, be good at finance. If you do marketing, be good at marketing in the time that we are living. So I think that's core. I think if you want to be a leader, I think honest leadership is super important. Down-to-earth leadership, honest leadership, the behavior part of leadership. If you need, as a leader, to be able to motivate people, to get people to collaborate together, and that each one see the totality. Because when you get people to see that they're part of a journey, they have much more speed. So building team, having the ability to build team, I think is super important. And the last thing is really the attitude of constant development. Never lean back on a good result. Enjoy it, celebrate it, but tomorrow find what could we do better.
You know, some of this you can learn in the classroom. Some of this you have to kind of learn by experience.
Yeah.
And you have your master's degree in economics from CBS in Copenhagen.
Yes.
And I know you was quite active in the student organization at CBS. Can you say what is your experience from your studies at CBS, and how has that shaped you?
It shaped me. First of all, I really liked the Danish culture. My mother was Danish, and my wife today is Danish, so I always loved that kind of outspoken culture. But in CBS, I think we first of all we did a lot of deliveries in writing thesis, etc. Together with team. It was a lot of teamwork at CBS. It was of course the sessions with teachers, etc. But it was a lot of teamwork. So I think CBS first and foremost learned me a lot about teamwork together. In the community, I was very active in ANSA. I was the head of the student newspaper, Danskaren. That was also pretty interesting. We had a very, very tight community, a very good community. We had a lot of fun, and I think that's super important. I don't want to think about my student time just as plugging and reading. That's of course important, but I can guarantee you we had a lot of fun. And I'm glad that we had time for that, because that kind of shaped what you go when you're doing business also. If you can't have fun at your workplace, it dies. So it's so important that you have leaders that understand how much fun and enjoyment also affect people. And I think I learned a lot of that in CBS. CBS, very relaxed environment, but at the same time pretty targeted. And you learn a lot about responsibility. Nobody cared for you. You have to find out yourself, like it is, I guess, on Bay, or when you start going on university. Yeah. That's the big change from being at high school.
What do you want to get out of it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Jacob, we have talked about your leadership style and motivation. What motivates Jacob Schram?
I think where I get my energy is first and foremost my family. That's kind of like you take a cell phone and put it into the stick to recharge. That's my recharging station. Following basketball games with my son, having good conversations with my daughter, and when we all four are together on holidays or doing things together, I think that's kind of the That's when you feel re-energized. So that's a super important thing for me. Then I learned, I was training a lot when I was younger, but I didn't do that enough when I was in my 30s, 40s. And you felt that the engine suddenly started to get down, because then you got small children at the same time you're trying to get a career, and you simply didn't have enough power. So training is super important, and I learned to kind of put training into my diary. So training 2 times is a minimum, 3 times then you kind of keep the level of the engine, and 4 times then you may improve it. So that's also where I get energy from. And then now we are in the process of reconstructing our house, because both our children have moved out, and there's a big empty space, and we need to reconstruct it. And actually, it's very nice to do something else than Norwegian and focusing on details on the interior or details like that.
You're doing painting and all the other things yourself?
Yeah, we have people helping us, but there's a million things to decide and find out, etc. So my wife and me is using a lot of energy on that.
Jacob, it's inspiring to listen to you. I have one question. When was you last inspired by someone?
That's quite recently, actually. My son is now in the military forces, and he said to me, the chief of the military forces, Eirik Kristoffersen, he has come out with a new book, and I actually saw that, called Jegerånden. And he said that that's a good idea for his birthday. And I bought that to him, and when he was home for leave, I had a chance to read it before he went off again. And that really inspired me. Eirik Kristoffersen, I never met him personally, but the way he writes about leadership is just spot on. I have super respect, first of all, because he has been through what he has been through. I mean, he's done more or less everything that you can do. He is in the front line. But at the same time, he has the distance and understand when giving people headroom, pointing out direction and giving people headroom. The things he writes about, how he views leadership, the situations he has been in to explain that inspired me a lot.
You know, here at BI, our focus is also on lifelong learning, and that means that we have grown-ups, not only first-time students coming back to BI, coming back again and again, and adding to their career. How do you think that, would you say that leaders should kind of help their focus on continuous improvement or continuous developing themselves, looking into new skills or things like that?
I think number one, and I said this several times during the interview, number one, as a leader, you have to listen. But it's not enough listening. You have to listen for real. I mean, really being interested. So when you have an employee in front of you and you're asking questions, don't ask questions just because you think it's right. When you ask questions, listen to the answers and see if you can learn something. And always you can learn something from everyone in the company. I think that's number one. Secondly, as a leader, I think you just have to be pragmatic on solutions. It's not a competitive game about winning. It's not about your solution has to win, because if my solution wins, then I'm raising kind of my star and I can grow in the company. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for people that contribute, that maybe build on idea, that promote other ideas, that maybe also have a good idea themselves. But we never kind of see, I never actually see who got the idea, who said it. It's more who contribute to the idea. So you have to be pragmatic about solution. You have always to go for the best solution. And thirdly, you have to dare to be challenged. Leaders that only have yes people around them will never learn. You have to accept that to be challenged. And I would say it's really, really dangerous if you're not challenged. And I say this from experience. I have so many times decided myself, after reading pre-read, going into my executive meetings, this case is very clear, we're going to right. I have come out of those meetings deciding that we go to the left. Because I was challenged and because it made sense. And then you can't be stubborn. You can't kind of say, I lose face now. You don't lose face. But I can tell you, you really lose face if you're just standing on your solution and it's wrong. So the reason you have a management group, because as a CEO or a leader, you are responsible for the decisions. The reason you have a management team is that they advise you to take the best decisions. And if you have a team of advisors, why not listening to them? And the last thing I want to say is that as a leader, you have to take risks. If you don't dare to take risk, you don't move. You must take risk. But it's a big difference between taking risk and gambling. So it's calculated risk, and that's, I think, what we learn, trying to learn at institutions like BAE and other places, is how to take calculated risks. But if you don't take risk and you always try to protect yourself, you will not be successful.
Jacob, we are getting close to the end of this hour. Before we close, is there anything else you would like to add that we have not been touched upon?
First of all, I thank you for the opportunity. I think it's super important that there is a bridge between the competence institutions like BAE, well-respected school, and the business environment. I remember myself when I was at CBS. I think one of the most inspiring things was when leaders from the business environment came and were talking. There's a lot to learn there, but there's also a lot to learn from students. So I think it's a good opportunity, and I will just inspired to do more of that, not only talking, but doing projects together, etc. I think there's a lot to learn both ways.
Thank you, Jacob. It has been really inspiring to talk to you for this hour. And thank you to all the people that has been following this webinar. And have a nice day. Go out in the nice weather, even though it's quite cold, but it will be warmer. So have a nice day, everyone.